Hello and welcome to Jesus for Asia Now. I'm Natalie Wood and my husband John is here with me today, and we have some inspiring stories from Cambodia. Hello, love.
Hi, darling.
I'm excited for our story today. I know I say that a lot, but this one's really neat because it shows the fingerprints of God so clearly.
Oh, man.
And in several different key ways.
Yeah, it's like layers of miracles happening. You can just really see God moving forward based on the faith of some people that stepped out without really any solid commitment from any donors or anything like that. They just stepped out knowing that God would provide. And to see how he's done it for a very vital need for the growth of the kingdom in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. So how does the story begin? I think it starts somewhere in 2008.
Yes, you and I were in Bangkok with our children, and we visited church planting pastor, Pastor Van, and you were old classmates with his wife.
Right.
And so we struck up a conversation, had a lot in common, and I got very interested in his church planting activities. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to do a TV series for Adventist Mission about the effect of the decline of giving on the frontline church planting efforts.
Mm. Yeah, so that show is called I Want This City.
Yes.
People can still find it and watch it.
Yeah.
At iwantthiscity.com.
Yeah. And then back in 2008, I filmed Pastor Doug in the Voice of Prophecy office, looking at the literature that they had available to them at that time, what they had to give to people. And we've still got that clip if you want to see it.
Sure, let's play it.
Okay.
God's work is languishing, and one example of that here that I live with daily is, what is there to communicate the hope that we have as Seventh-day Adventist Christians? What is there that communicates to the people around us what the Bible teaches about what will happen in these end days? And obviously, if you go to your local church literature rack, you can find tracts on Sabbath and the sanctuary and the state of the dead and the fact that Jesus is coming so soon. But here in Thailand, we're here actually in the office of the Adventist, the Voice of Prophecy. But I want to just have you take a look. Here we have photocopies of lessons that are, what I've been told, they're over 60 years old. And you can see here that, the truth is there, but even at my second and third grade level of Thai, some of these words I can't even read what letter this is. What is that? What is that letter right there? It's a blob of ink. And so how can the truth be clearly communicated when we're dealing with a copy of a copy of a copy? And yet I asked John Sipin, the Voice of Prophecy director, I said, what will it take to get new lessons printed? And she said to me, we need money. And I said, well, how much? And she said, well, a typical run of printing would be about $3,000 to $5,000 to get new lessons made. And I'm like, $3,000 to $5,000 to get new lessons, so that way the precious Thai people will have hope and they'll know what's coming. Here's another set this is, because here in Thailand we have Buddhists, and they have the worldview is completely different. And so here, this is a set that looks at what is good in Buddhism. How has God used the truth there to then make a bridge to the Bible? And so here, this is a wonderful set of lessons, but you look at the picture, and what do you see here?
Bunch of blobs.
It's just, it's not quite clear. And
not very attractive.
Yeah, it's needless to say. Then we can look here that...
So when somebody calls interested in Adventism, this is what we send them?
When someone calls, or actually when they write, they come, the letter comes here to the mission, or an email is sent, or, churches ask for literature, and this is what we have.
And that was shot in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
When did you actually shoot the I Want This City show?
2010, 2011. Took I thought it was going to take about 2 months, but it ended up taking 9.
There was a lot of activity going on with the church planting, and
Yes.
so you had a lot of angles and different things to film there.
Yeah, and while I was there filming that, I had to film the closing of the printing press for Southeast Asia in Bangkok, and just really felt sad about that. They just weren't printing enough books to keep it going. In fact, while I was filming in 2011, they had exactly 0 Ellen White books in Thai in print. One of the lay members would print the Steps to Christ, the booklet or the book, the small book, but there is no Desire of Ages, no Great Controversy, no Ministry of Healing, nothing like that in the local language. And that was Thailand, not to mention Cambodia and other countries that didn't have the resources that even Thailand had. Now, Thailand's resources at that time, the yearly budget for all personal ministries, all outreach, all printing, literature, all that kind of stuff was $45,000 per year. We know some churches that have a bigger monthly budget here in America than that. And so they were operating on a very shoestring budget. And you can imagine some of the smaller countries that don't even have that much, like Cambodia had a budget of exactly 0 starting out the year.
Yeah. It's really, when you think about the disparity,
Yes.
you know, between what we have available here and what's available there, it just really breaks your heart. Because not only do they not have these resources, they're not a, how do I put this, like a base Christian country. Like our country
Right.
started out as a Christian country.
Exactly.
But they don't have that. They don't have that history. They don't have those principles built in anywhere.
Right.
And then they don't have the resources that we have, the spiritual resources.
Right. Yeah. Well,
So it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, our denomination was built on the printed page. You know.
It's true.
And so to not have that in a country, in any language, there's thousands of languages that don't have the Bible yet. But in a major language, in a major country, to see a printing press close was pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So after filming that, we came home and we did a faith camp up in the Northwest. And somebody responded, saw the need, felt the same way we did.
Right. And that's what this show is about. It's
Yeah.
about the Rogers family answering the call of God on their hearts.
Yes.
So we have a little video where they talk about how they came to go to Cambodia.
Okay.
I had a burden for literature that contained the truth. So God opened up the opportunity for me to learn printing. Up until that point, I was a graphic designer. And so I knew the computer side of things, but to actually run the equipment, like the press, the folder, all those things I didn't know. So I got the experience with a summer working with him, and then started my own small print shop that was focused on tracts and truth-filled literature. And during the time that I was actually having the small print shop, I heard about the need, specifically in Bangkok, of how most of the stuff that they had was copies of copies of copies. And so some of the pictures you couldn't even tell what it was. And I felt sad. And so in my heart I said, well, I'll pray about it. But the idea of going to the missions, that wasn't there yet.
There are no Desire of Ages or Steps to Christ books available in the bookstore, yet tens of millions of Thais still live with no clue that Jesus even exists. The real issue is, am I willing to let it stay this way? Do I care enough to do something, to give something more than the $21 a year that the average North American Adventist gives?
4 years went by, and in some ways I consider myself 4 years late. I ended up going to faith camp, and then toward the end of the camp meeting, again it was presented the needs that were in Thailand, specifically around literature. And they were the same, nothing had changed. And I realized, you know, Lord, I guess I'm willing to help. I just said last time that I would pray about it, but nothing's happened. So if you want me to be a helper, I'm willing to go.
ever since I can remember, I've wanted to do something in the mission field. And we've read lots of mission stories, but I've never been out of the continental US. And Kenton's not the kind that would typically choose an adventure like this. And so I was excited. It wasn't a problem for me.
I was looking primarily at Thailand and talking with people that had been in Thailand. But every time that I would mention to John Wood that I was considering Thailand and what I was finding about Thailand, he would also come back and say, well, have you considered Cambodia? I didn't even know anything about Cambodia. So I would just kind of put that off to the side and continue looking at Thailand. But after the third time that he said, have you considered Cambodia? I said, okay, God, I'm willing to look at Cambodia. So I actually started looking at Cambodia, and the laws for a foreigner to have a business in Cambodia, the difficulties here are less than in Thailand. As we were deciding then that we were going to come to Cambodia, we had an anonymous donation of $3,000. And that's not quite enough to get tickets, because we'd been hearing prices more around $1,000 a piece. So that would be $5,000 that my family would need to come. But my sister-in-law, she said, why don't you just go ahead and try, see what you can find for tickets. So we went ahead and got online and found that we could get tickets, and went ahead and purchased tickets for $2,800. So that was within the $3,000.
$2,800 is really miraculous for a family of 5.
Uh-huh,
I mean, they were one way, but still, that's really, really low.
Yeah, and these are the things that we see happening when people step out in faith and commit to go and just see what God does. And it's over and over again. The people see their faith tried, and then they take the risk, and then God comes through, and their faith grows.
Yeah. So that was kind of before they went to Cambodia.
Yeah.
And this next video is not long after they got there.
Yes.
So when we got here, God led through a very persistent tuk-tuk driver who volunteered to actually help us find an apartment to live in. So we ended up moving into an apartment that was fairly close to the mission. And so we waited for an opportunity to talk with the mission president. And when we did, I talked with him and shared with him my ideas, my goals, and he shared with us kind of what's happening in Cambodia with the literature. So at the end of my talk with him, I asked him what city would be good to have this publishing house at. And instead of saying a city, he said, well, how about some property that the mission has? And I was like, well, yeah, we could go take a look at it. So he let us come down here and look at it the next day. So we were able to start planning to move here. But just at that time is when COVID came, and the restrictions, primarily in small villages, became very tight. And so we were told by the chief that we couldn't move in. So we were stuck still in the main city in an apartment, and it came to the place where we had to renew our contract for the apartment, yet we still couldn't go out to the village. We prayed and said, Lord, this week you either have to open up the property for us to move out to, or we need to go home, because we can't just live here in this apartment in the city for another 6 months. A friend of ours, David, he called us up and said, have you been able to get out to the property? And we said, no, we're still here. He said, well, let's call the chief and ask him. So he called the chief, and the chief said, sure, have them come. And this was on Thursday. He said, so have them come Friday, and we'll fill out all the paperwork. Now, prior to that, he had been closed and no, you can't come. And now he was willing for us to come, and the chief was very helpful. And so we were able to then move the following week out here to the property with no electricity, no running water, and an abandoned house. But God provided for us. That week was hard, but we got electricity, we got water, and it was much better.
Isn't that neat how God kind of arranged things for them, already had some property available for them to use that wasn't being used?
Yeah, and how God opened at the right time, you know, just when the contract was needing to be renewed for their apartment, opened the opportunity for them to go to the village, and then the chief of the village was so helpful at that point. He hadn't been helpful at all before, but then he was helpful. So it just shows God's ability to work with people's hearts and to lead them, like, from maybe where they've been to a different attitude.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of those you would actually count as a miracle. We call them as fingerprints of God.
Yeah.
You know, that don't just happen by chance.
Right.
You know, they don't just like fall into place. So many little things that fall into place just by chance.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Definitely a God thing.
So we see God moving there.
Right. And speaking of God things, the next video section we have is about equipment purchasing and shipping.
So after we had been here in Cambodia for about a year, John would ask me to share at a faith camp, just briefly over Zoom. So I said yeah, and then he asked me if I had actually thought about how much things cost, how much would I need. And I said, well, I haven't thought about that. So he said, you need to think about that. So I spent a day thinking about, well, you know, if I got a large copier, something that can fit on the table for making books and booklets, that would probably be about $50,000. Then I was looking at another size bigger than that, and that's not in the house. That would have to be in a print shop, and that came up to be $150,000. So when Faith Camp came, I shared mainly just the focus of everything, and at the end, John asked me, well, how much do you need? And I said, well, anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000. And when it came to the end of Faith Camp, there was a matching grant, 2-to-1, of $100,000. So that would be, once it matched, $150,000. So to me, it's like God wants the $150,000 size. So that's what I ended up then looking for. I like to watch the printing auctions because they're selling equipment and find out what things go for in the auctions, but most of it I can't use. But I noticed that there was a large commercial size copier, and its power requirement was both for Europe and the US, so it was actually something that I could use. Even though I saw this, I wasn't planning on bidding on it, but in the middle of the night, I was woken up with the idea, you need to bid on that printer. So I checked the time. It was 1 hour before the bidding closed. I was like, well, how much do I bid? And the thought came to mind, you bid $1,000. So I got up, placed the $1,000 bid, and went back to sleep. Woke up the next morning, and I had won the bid. It was like $960. Once it got here though, after all the process of getting here, it did end up being basically about $5,000 for each machine. I had bid on one machine, but the guy actually ended up having 2 more machines that he wanted to get rid of, and a parts machine, so that was 4 machines that were coming, and they filled a full 40-foot container. I started looking at the need of a folder, the need of a perfect binder, the need of a cutter, and all those things I found in Europe. And over the course of about a month, was able to make those purchases and start those pieces coming in containers to Cambodia.
So some more miracles in there. Just happened to wake up just an hour before the bidding stopped.
Happened to, no.
Yeah. It's evidently the Lord cares about printing.
Yep. Yeah.
Lord cares
and
about.
the Lord told him how much to bid.
Yeah.
And then, gave him more machines available from the same seller and several things like that. It's just like, it's not by chance.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the biggest miracles are still to come.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's watch those.
Okay.
Shipping to Cambodia is not something that is done every day. So even the people in England that were shipping it were not aware that when you ship to the main port in Cambodia, it's connected to the ocean. But there's another port that's up by the capital city that if you ship to it, it has to go through Vietnamese waters. And the Vietnamese have to have special permits, special prices for going through their waters. Well, this I didn't know, and this they didn't know. So 2 of the 4 containers got shipped through Vietnam. And as soon as they got to Vietnam, they were held there. After waiting about a month, I was informed that they were held there, and every day it costs money to store it there. As time went on, I was very much praying and asking people to help pray for it. So out of the 2 containers, 1 container, the sender basically gave up on it. So I wasn't sure what to do about that one. But as time went on, at one point, God asked me, well, why don't you ask for me just to send it to you? And so I thought, well, yeah, I guess I could ask. So I prayed, Lord, if you want the container just to be loaded on to the ship and sent up the port and unloaded, and then maybe you have to close their eyes for that whole process, then please do that. And about 2 weeks later, I got an email saying that one of my containers had arrived. And of course I was very happy, and so that started the process of bringing it into Cambodia through the customs in Cambodia, and I have to pay for offloading it off the boat onto a truck, which is about $150. So when they gave me the bill, it was only for $150. And I wrote back to them and said, well, isn't there anything extra charges from like Vietnam? And also I would like to know how you got the container here to Cambodia, because I still have another one in Vietnam and having difficulties with it. And they wrote back to me and said, well, we don't know how it got here. We just give you notification of when it arrives. That container was loaded without anyone being aware that it was loaded and brought here. And I'm thankful. So that one, he worked without any money. But the other one did cost some money to get it. And at one point in the process, I realized that it was going to be more money than what I had. So I didn't know what to do. So I went and had prayer. But again, discouragement is real. And at the end of my prayer, I didn't have some great feeling that God was going to answer. But what I did know is that he knew about the problem. He knew that there was a container there. He knew that it was going to cost more than what I had. The next day, I got a text message from someone in the States. And they said that 2 days prior, they had sent a check specifically marked for shipping. And it was for $20,000. When everything was said and done for those 2 containers, it was $20,000. So God knew how much it was needed too, and he knew and provided the night or the day before I knew of it. He provided that. So God provides with money, and he can provide without money. And it's an encouragement for me to look back on those and say, God knew the problem. He had solutions for the problems. It's not always money, but he's able to work and able to solve it.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Pure miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With money or without money. I love that because
Yeah.
it's so true. And like God impressed him, why didn't you ask me?
Yeah.
It's like so many times we're like racking our brain, trying to figure out the solution, trying to solve it, trying to come up with the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And we could just take it to the one who knows everything
Yeah.
and rest it there in his hands, and you never know what he's going to do.
But I think it's key that God asked him to ask him.
Yeah.
It's like somehow that gives God permission to move where he wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him via text, saying, you know, he's telling me the situation, and it hasn't come. We don't know how to get it to come. We don't have any solution. And I'm just sitting there like, well, I guess if you've lost the container, you have to start over and just pray for more funds. And then it's like the last day before, it's like everything, it's like he couldn't receive it anymore after a certain date. And either the day before or on that date, it just showed up. And we're all like, wow, that is God.
And to get the other one out of Vietnam is just as much of a miracle,
Yes.
although completely different type of, you know, end result he had to pay. But
Right.
still, it's just like they were stuck there.
And then God providing
And
the exact
God
amount that
provided.
they needed to pay.
Right, right.
God is good.
And that just shows the importance of those of us over here and the prayers that we pray for these projects.
Yes.
You know, because God can move because we pray also.
Yes.
And then he can impress on people's hearts to give, like that $20,000. It's like, why did the donor think that they needed $20,000 for shipping? You know, how could this not be a God thing?
We hadn't advertised
And-
that. We hadn't
right.
sent that out on an email. We're just
Right,
that God would impress somebody.
right. So it shows the urgent, cooperative,
Yes.
supportive effort that we all need to be in together for these projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people say, you know, or they look at prayer as like, oh, we just pray. Let's do something real. But prayer, active prayer by faith, is real. It's really the best work we can do. It allows God to move in ways that we can't.
Right, and it makes such huge differences.
Yes.
So we unfortunately don't have enough time to share the rest of their report
Yes.
because there's more to it. There's
Yeah,
more to the
so
story.
much more.
They have built a print shop and they have the equipment in there, as we saw briefly in one of the clips. And so there's a story behind that also, several stories behind that also. So
Yes.
we will be sharing that in the next show.
Right.
And if you would like to support the publishing work in Southeast Asia, please contact us at Jesus for Asia, P.O. Box 1221, Collegedale, Tennessee 37315. Call us at 423-413-7321 or visit our website at jesusforasia.org. May God richly bless you until we see you next time on Jesus for Asia Now.